when somebody introduces me, I start looking around, wondering who they're talking about. Like this isn't my real life. It's like a fairy tale. I'm just going to start by saying that I was set up. I didn't really stand a chance. In fact, the deck was stacked against me. If what Dr. Gabor Mate said in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, is true, then it was destiny that I would suffer with mental health issues and addiction. And he's come to believe that more than any other factor in the world, I move around, you'll have to excuse me, any other factor in the world, that the one indicator, the one factor that determines whether somebody's going to have success or hardship is the first few months and years of their life, more than DNA and more than family history. And I was born into a dysfunctional family. My parents struggled with alcohol and mental health, and they were unprepared. And so I came into the world, and that's why I say it was kind of, the cards were stacked against me. Sorry, I have this because I know when I get nervous, I slip. I'll get onto this though. First part's fairly new. Yeah. And so we were also, I was born into a poor family, and by poor, I mean poor in a Western sense. We ate a lot of chicken and soup and Kraft dinner. For breakfast, we had rolled oats and puffed rice. And I don't know if anybody here remembers the bags of puffed rice. And yeah, they looked like styrofoam. They tasted like styrofoam, and all the sugar in the world wouldn't fix that. I used to look forward to going over to friends' places, sleep overnight, because in the morning I could raid their closet, the cupboard for like Fruit Loops or honeycomb. See, I had a pattern starting even then. But yeah. My mom was a bit obsessive. She used to make us tear the Kleenex and the tissue paper in half so we wouldn't waste any money. I mean, now they perforate it. She was ahead of her time, you know. I'm just really thankful that they didn't have 2-ply toilet paper, because you can imagine, you know, trying to peel those apart and use them. So that's why I say I struggled. And I did struggle. I struggled, and I drank and I smoked, and I had no coping skills, and I used alcohol as a way to self-medicate against mental illness I didn't know I had. I love the name of this venue, Flip the Script. Who loves the name of this venue? I mean, seriously, wow. Because if you're going to stand a chance in life, if you come from what I came from and it was my destiny to struggle, then I needed to flip the script. I needed to take hold of those thoughts that I had, those automatic thoughts and reactions and feelings, and I had to say, is this really true in life? Is this true? And I learned to challenge my thinking and my feeling and my extreme behaviors. And today we call that CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy. So I'm actually going to use a little bit of time and flip the script with us right now. See, most of us would probably agree life is hard, right? Life is hard. And I used to believe that, but I'm going to flip the script for us tonight. So if you believe that, you're going to leave with a different idea. Because life is not hard, life is a gift. Circumstances are hard, because if life is hard, we don't stand a chance. But if circumstances are hard and life is a gift, there's hope. And we don't hope in vain, but we hold on to hope for a better future. And even though we suffer, and in our darkest moments, in those moments of despair, we still have hope. A hope that we could all embrace a better future, a new normal. There's another thing I'd like to flip the script on, and that is that in order to win, you have to fight. And in many cases, that's true. But in my case, in order to have victory, I had to surrender. I had to surrender my will, my pride, my concept of what life was about. And so I surrendered my life over to the care of God as I understood Him, and I became a Christian. Don't worry, this isn't a sermon. This is just the truth of my life. And so with that, my life did flip. And I started a business. I got married. Things were going really well. We had 4 children. My oldest is here. Sorry. We bought a house. We had 2.5 cars. You ever tried to drive half a car? That was a trick. Something was always underlying, though. There was always this underlying thing that I didn't understand. I just had no idea. And by the time I was in my 40s, my world would collapse again. I kept on spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, and this time it was bad. And so I found myself broken and confused and suicidal. And that night, instead of acting on my despair, I asked my wife to take me to the hospital, and rather than take myself out, I checked myself in. And so there I was, the psychiatric ward of the hospital, and 2 things were about to happen that at the time I couldn't possibly understand their significance. There's times in your life when there's everything that happens before a moment and everything that happens after, and this was one of those times. I've come to learn that that wasn't my breaking point or my bottom, but that was the beginning of a new beginning. That was my tipping point. The first thing to happen was I got an accurate diagnosis of bipolar disorder. My doctor gave me the diagnosis and a handful of pills, and after several days on new medication and under a doctor's care, I began to get clear and stable. And for the first time in a long time, I had hope. The second thing to happen was while I was in the hospital, my wife, you'll have to excuse me, this is always emotional. My wife sat down beside me and she said, "Hun, when were you happy?" And I gotta tell you about the times this would happen. I'd go to my psychiatrist's office and he would look at me, and every time he would say, "Ron, are you happy?" And I would think to myself, can I punch you? I didn't, which is proof that therapy works. But I didn't have a concept for happiness at the time. What was interesting was the way my wife asked me, and she framed it differently. She said, "When were you happy?" Remember, this is about reframing how we think. And when she said, "When were you happy?" I immediately responded and said, "When I was photographing, when I was teaching, and when I was retouching." And then she said these life-giving words. She looked at me and said, "Then, hun, whatever it takes, do that." And in that moment, I had permission and support to do what I can't help but do. And not just permission from my wife, but permission from deep within me to let go of a failed business and a life that I thought I ought to be living, to embrace a new normal, doing what I can't help but do. And for me, that's to use this camera to capture beauty and character in the people I meet and the places I travel to, and to help others do the same. I want to kind of wrap up talking about the polar regions because I am the bipolar photographer, and you now know that I mean that in every sense of the word. Something about Antarctica gripped me, and I couldn't explain it until recently. In fact, I was preparing the TEDx talk that I did when I realized what it was about Antarctica. Life found a way to survive there in spite of it being one of the harshest places on Earth. Life finds a way to thrive in the harshest environments on Earth. I brought the picture of the iceberg because I want to leave you with these thoughts about ice. There's something about polar ice that grips me to my soul, and I know I'm not alone in this. Amazing floating works of art are created when huge chunks of ice crash off of a glacier and land in the sea, and that's the birth of an iceberg when it starts its life in the ocean. And most of us know that most of an iceberg is underwater, as much as 90%. And it's what's happening underwater that's important. You see, the ocean is carving and shaping the ice. And as it carves it and shapes it, the ocean's relentless force against that iceberg causes it to shrink and melt, and it gets lighter and lighter until eventually it flips. It reaches its tipping point. It flips to reveal some of the most unique and beautiful sculptures I have ever seen. And if you've ever seen ice on a cloudy day, you'll know that it glows from within, this radiant blue, almost like it had its own light source. And I believe what's true about the iceberg is true about you, and it's true about me, that we are made unique and beautiful, not in spite of life circumstances against us. We are made unique and beautiful because of it. Thank you.